All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Nasser Rabat, and I'm the convener of this lecture series of the Astrakhan program here at MIT called An Evening With. Usually, we have taken to starting our lectures with a reading of the land acknowledgement. I'm no longer going to do it because I've realized it's such a hypocritical thing to do it after the lecture that Lambert gave us a couple of weeks ago. I'm no longer going to do this because if we are really serious about it, there is a Wampanoag tribe around Massachusetts. We can return the land to them. We don't need to just assert that the land is there. I am not going to be presenting our speaker today, but instead I'm just going to have few notes, and then Rida Anuti will be the person who will present our speaker today, Yuka Kadoi, who is going to speak about the Mosque of Japan, a topic that actually to me is an extremely exciting topic. I just want to say that we still have 3 more events sponsored by the Astrakhan program, and potentially even more that I will announce when they happen. But at this point in time, the next talk is on April 8th, and it is by Patricia Blessing from Stanford University, and it's going to be Spaces of Artifice, Interiors, and the Environment in Islamic Architecture is the title. And then on April the 12th, this is the added event, we are going to have an event of 2 hours in the afternoon. It's a Friday, and it's about thinking through architecture in the Arab world, and it is to celebrate the launch of a book called Critical Encounters, Nasser Rabat, me that is, and it's the 2nd volume of the Dongola architectural series that is coming out in Beirut, and that is trying to create a new library on architects in the Arab world that are active and influential today. We are going to have the publisher and the editor, who is a graduate of our ACT program, Rafat al-Majdoub. The publisher is Sarah Shalabi, and myself, and possibly Azra, if she agrees, to basically have a discussion about the topic. Azra will be the moderator, so you're not going to be asked to do anything. This is going to be again on April 12th in the afternoon, on a Friday. And the last lecture on our lecture series, without the few additional potential lectures that are very much related to the status of the world today, and therefore they are as fluid as the status of the world is, but otherwise, our last lecture is by Roberto Fabri, our postdoc this semester, and the title is Nomadic Narratives, Architectural Transplants. Otherwise, Rida, please come and introduce Yuka.
Thank you, everyone. I don't know if this is working. I think so. Yeah. Great. Thanks for being here today to tune into this exciting lecture. As a little introduction, Yuka Kadoi is an art historian, historiographer, museologist, and cultural theorist. She currently holds the Elise Richter position at the Faculty of Historical and Cultural Studies in the University of Vienna's Department of Art History. She also directs the research project Persica Centropa, Cosmopolitan Artifacts and Artifices in the Age of Crises from 1900 to 1950, which is funded by the Austrian Science Fund. Originally from Tokyo, Kadoi obtained her PhD in History of Art from the University of Edinburgh, where she studied both Eastern and Western traditions of Oriental studies. She acquired a dual background in East Asian studies, namely Toyoshi, from Kyoto, and Islamic and Middle Eastern studies from Edinburgh, alongside her main expertise in the art, architecture, and material culture of pre-modern Eurasia. Her scholarly interests include the mobility of artifacts, the history of collecting, and critical museology. In her own words, Kadoi describes her educational background as unusual, leading her down a winding academic path. However, her unique scholarly journey has also equipped her with valuable opportunities to explore experimental ideas and develop new methodologies, allowing her to carve out her own niche in the field. Kadoi is also the author and editor of 7 books and 3 special issues of peer-reviewed journals, notably her award-winning work, Islamic Chinoiserie, The Art of Mongol Iran, published by Edinburgh University Press. Additionally, she has contributed over 60 articles to scholarly journals and co-edited volumes. She is currently finalizing the manuscript for her second monograph, The History and Historiography of Persian Art from 1900 to 1935, also published by Edinburgh University Press. Throughout her career, Kadoi has held esteemed fellowships and visiting professorships from institutions such as the Warburg Institute in London, the Institute for Advanced Studies in the Humanities at the University of Edinburgh, the Center for Advanced Study in the Visual Arts in Washington, D.C., the Lebanese American University in Beirut, the Museum of Ethnology in Osaka, and the Institute of Advanced Study at Central European University in Budapest. She has also curated several exhibitions, some of which are the Blue Road Mastercrafts from Persia, which was showcased at the Liang Yi Museum of Hong Kong in 2018, and the World History of Rashid ad-Din from 1314, a masterpiece of Islamic painting, which was exhibited in Edinburgh University Library in 2014, as well as Arthur Pope and a new survey of Persian art, which was showcased at the Art Institute of Chicago in 2010. With her rich expertise and extensive research in the exploration of Islamic architecture's frontier in Japan, I'm excited to introduce the topic of today's lecture, titled Building Mosques in the Eastern Periphery of the Muslim World, circa 1930s. This lecture delves into the intriguing question, how could a mosque be designed and built in a place where there was no pre-existing tradition of Islamic architecture, such as Japan? This presentation explores the frontier of Islamic architecture in the Far East through an examination of 2 significant mosques, or case studies, that are the mosques of Tokyo Mosque, built in 1938, and Kobe Mosque, or Kobe Grand Mosque, also known as Kobe Muslim Mosque, built in 1935. Although stylistically different from one another, these mosques divulge the history of the influx of refugees and expatriates from Muslim-majority nations, particularly Tatars, in addition to the establishment of their community within a rapidly modernized and cosmopolitanized insular country. These mosques also shed light on the involvement of architects and religious activists from another frontier of the Islamic world, namely Tsarist Russia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. While bearing resemblance to Tatar mosques in Kazan and Astrakhan and exhibiting characteristics of vernacular religious structures typical of Eastern Europe, the stylistic singularity of Islamic architecture in Japan stems from its geographical isolation amidst the Pacific Ocean's many diverse cultures. The Tokyo and Kobe mosques challenge any straightforward or simple classification within the conventional canon of Islamic architectural styles predominant in the Middle East and North Africa. However, Japan's response to the production, exchange, and consumption of Islam provides unique insights into the Pacific Ocean's connectivity to and the region's unexplored articulation with the rest of the world. The study also offers a valuable lens through which to expand our understanding of the role of frontier cultures in disseminating pan-Turkic religio-cultural sentiments across Eurasia in modern times. I'm sure we're all excited to learn more about this presentation and captivating work, so help me in welcoming Yuka Kadoi. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. And above all, I'd like to thank Nasser Rabat for inviting me to give a talk at Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture Lecture Series at MIT. I also would like to thank Diana Roney for sorting out my logistics, as well as those who are attending my lecture today, both in this room and also in the virtual space. Today I'm delighted to have opportunity to introduce one of the research topics that I have recently developed, along with my long-standing interest in artistic exchanges between Islamic heartland of the Middle East and North Africa and East Asia. Right. So before I start my talk, I'd like to make some acknowledgement. And since I have a limited time today, let me list institutions and researchers who have supported my research initiatives. So first of all, I'd like to thank Austrian Science Fund, FF, which has given me a tremendous opportunity to focus exclusively on research projects since 2019. And also I'd like to thank University of Vienna, the Faculty of Historical and Cultural Studies, the Department of Art History, for hosting my projects and also my position. And in Japan, I'd like to thank Tokyo Camii, or simply known as Tokyo Mosque, in particular Department of Public Relations, and Kobe Grand Mosque, or Kobe Mosque. And I also would like to thank some individual researchers, particularly Michael Erdmann, London, Ali Dündar, Ankara, Shakira Kazanova, Warsaw, and Noha Sadek in Paris, and many, many thanks. So finally, the talk based on this subject is going to be published as a research paper in the Festschrift of Bernard O'Kane, edited by Heba Mustafa. However, I still have an opportunity to edit my paper, so any suggestion would be much appreciated today. So what I'd like to do today is to simply put in, to address and answer the following fundamental question: how to build a mosque in a place where there's no pre-existing tradition, such as Japan. In East Asia, the situation was extremely complicated because of the long pre-existing building tradition of polytheistic social system, notably Buddhism. China's early mosques, published in 2015, elaborates on the question of how monotheistic religious buildings could find their way into a topography where no such tradition existed in the past. What happened in China, for instance, was that the Muslim communities coming from West Asia and South Asia brought their homeland style to their newly settled land at the beginning. But once they are forced to assimilate themselves into Chinese society, their place of worship had to adopt more visibly Chinese-looking appearance, hence being rebuilt as Buddhist or Taoist temples. Yet there is one area, even within the eastern frontier of the Muslim world, that has almost never been discussed in the wider context of Islamization, namely Japan. This Far Eastern island country has been so far categorically excluded from any survey of Muslim material remains, although it is difficult to write so-called global Islamic architectural history satisfactorily without considering marginalized regions across the gateway to a Dar al-Islam. While the country's geographical isolation may have hampered lively cultural contacts, Japan became, rather unexpectedly, a major marketplace of religious economies, including Islam, during the first 3 decades of the 20th century. While overviewing Japan's cultural contacts with the rest of the world in the pre-modern times, my talk today explored 2 case studies in Showa period, namely Tokyo Camii, completed in 1938, and the Kobe Grand Mosque, completed in 1935. Japan's responses to the production, exchange, and consumption of Islam offer unique windows on Pacific Ocean connectivities and the region's hitherto unexplored process of religious cultural articulation. According to 8 contact zones of the world system during the 13th century, proposed by the study entitled Before European Hegemony, published in 1991, places found in the edge of the Eurasia map are deemed to be isolated, thus no need to establish any contacts whatsoever with the rest of the world. My aim here is not arguing why this map excluded larger part of Africa and part of Asia, notably Japan, from the global contact zone of the pre-modern world. But rather do I consider this as a starting point to highlight Japan's unique history of cultural exchange. The fact is that Japan was well connected with the rest of Asia as part of the East Indian Ocean trade and Buddhist networks in pre-modern times. Today, I have no time to go through an entire history of this island country, but let me remark on some key dates of Japan's overseas contacts in pre-modern times, such as the Mongol invasions 2 times, 1274 and 1281, both failed. The arrival of the Portuguese traders in 1543 is particularly important because this marked the arrival of Christianity in Japan, hence the first introduction to monotheism. Although the arrival of Middle Eastern goods in this part of Asia can be traced back as early as the 9th century, information about Muslim culture was extremely limited in Japan until the arrival of the Christians in the 16th century. For instance, the painting on the screen, which was made by a Japanese artist trained in a Jesuit seminary, depicts the 4 equestrians to symbolize the following political entities of the time from left to right. Number 1, Holy Roman Empire. Number 2, Ottoman Empire. Number 3, Russian Empire. And finally, the Kingdom of Tatars, also known as the Crimean Khanate. Based on the Christian iconography of the Crusaders fighting with the Muslims, this painting could be considered as one of the earliest depictions of major historical figures of the early modern world in Japanese art. Some eclectic elements found in this painting are due to the fact that this painting was later reframed as a traditional Japanese screen painting. Japan's proto-globalization got interrupted as a result of closing its door in 1639, except for the designated artificial island called Dejima in Kyushu Island, which only took Dutch and Chinese traders and through them selected foreign goods. But on the other hand, thanks to this closure, Japan avoided being colonized by European powers. Japan could have been a Latin country like the Philippines if the country did not shut its door. Similarly, despite the disclosure, information still continued to flow into the country, and some notable objects were made or arrived, such as kaba lacquerware and textiles and carpet from West Asia and South Asia. It is important to note, however, that these objects on the screen were not meant to be commodities widely circulating across the country, but they are manufactured, they say, for specific markets, either for overseas export or for exclusive domestic customers, such as shoguns and monks, thus no interaction with local ordinary Japanese communities. The turning point came in the 19th century, when the country opened its gate once again to the rest of the world. Let me summarize 3 major outcomes of the reopening of the country's market and diplomatic relations, so-called Meiji Restoration in 1868. So number 1, industrialization, number 2, modernization, and 3rd, westernization. Among these, the most radical state policy was westernization. Japan was in fact a secular federal country for a long time, but in order to westernize the political system, a semi-forgotten state symbol, the emperor, was elevated as a head of state, as you can see the painting on the left, where the imperial family is portrayed as a European monarch. In order to westernize the society further, Japan also had to contend with the freedom of religion, although throughout its long history, Japan has no concept equivalent to what is considered religion in Western society. Hence, Islam was introduced to Japan essentially as Western, together with other monotheistic religions. So having overviewed Japan's cultural contacts with the rest of the world in pre-modern times, I would like now move on to the two case studies concerning the construction of mosques in Japan in the early 20th century. There are two routes of Islamization in modern Japan. One is a northern route and another is southern route. So now let's start with the northern route. The northern group of Muslims came from Russia, and they are Tatar refugees who had to leave their homeland due to October Revolution in 1917. Looking eastward for the frontier of the historic Turkic lands, they crossed the Mamiya Channel, commonly known as the Tatar Channel, landed in Sakhalin or Karafut Island, then Hokkaido, and the main island, and eventually settled down in Tokyo. Although they took this long journey for migration purposes, this was also accompanied by religious activists aiming at the introduction of true Islam into Japan, or even intended to encourage the emperor to embrace Islam. The major players include Muhammad Gabruhal Gurgan Ghali, or also known as the Abdul Hai Gurgan Ali, or Abdul Rashid Ibrahim. Both arrived in Japan in the early 1920s and initiated a movement to unite the Tatar diaspora. And here, what kind of Islam was introduced first to Japan? So Sunni Islam rather than Shiite Islam. Abdul Rashid Ibrahim was also the first Muslim who successfully persuaded Japanese people to convert to Islam. Kotaro Yamaoka, the first recorded Japanese Muslim, so-called Japanese Lawrence of Arabia, went on Hajj and also traveling to the Ottoman Empire to seek the Sultan's approval for building a mosque in Tokyo. The Sultan's approval was granted in 1910, but the construction of the Tokyo Mosque was finally completed nearly 20 years later. This plan could have realized much earlier if the catastrophic earthquake in Tokyo did not happen in 1923. Around the same time, the Arabic Quran began to be printed in Japan, and the first translation of the Quran in East Asia was done in Japanese in 1920. Interestingly, not from the original Arabic version, but from the English translation of the Quran. So here you see a kind of twisted Orientalism in Japan. What we know is that there are a temporary residential-style wooden building that functioned as a mosque in Tokyo around 1920, but this structure was destroyed by the earthquake in 1923. After this earthquake, the Tatar community, which used to be concentrated in Tokyo, split into several groups to move across the country. Despite this setback, the Tatars resumed their plan to build a proper mosque in Tokyo. On the left, we have some rare photos of the mosque under construction. The mosque was finally built in a district called Shibuya in central Tokyo, along with the adjoining madrasa under the direction of Ibrahim, who became the first imam of the mosque, and it was opened to the public in May 1938. In terms of publications concerning Tokyo Mosque, I'd like to talk a little bit about this article today. And this article is entitled Tokyo Kaikyo Reihaido, literally Tokyo Mosque, and appeared in a journal called Kenchiku Zashi, literally Architecture Magazine, in September 1938. This article is historiographically important for the following two reasons. And first, it appeared in the Kenchiku Zashi, the oldest academic architectural journal in Japan, began in April 1887. Second, this article can be considered as the first of this kind published in Japanese. Although there's no author's name attached to this article deserves a detailed investigation. especially for those who are interested in the so-called lost in translation. And it is quite fascinating, for me at least, to see the unnamed author struggling to translate Arabic terms into proper Japanese. And for this article, I'd like to thank Tokyo Mosque, Department of Public Relations, for drawing my attention. Although I cannot translate this article word by word today, I'm happy to show the whole article and to make some short remarks. Basically, it's a 3-page article with one beautifully executed drawing and 4 black and white photographs. So it's not a long article, but a short article. And despite the title, Tokyo Kaikyo Reihai-do, this article, however, does not discuss Tokyo Mosque in detail in the first 2 pages. And instead, it is like an encyclopedic entry if one would evaluate this as one of the earliest introductions to Islamic architecture written in Japanese. On the 3rd page, only the 3rd page, in fact, concerned with the Tokyo Mosque. And this page is of particular importance in terms of providing useful architectural data on the mosque. And for instance, we know the names of the designer and construction company in charge of a Tokyo Mosque project on the right-hand side top. The first line, underlined in red, Koji Sekkei Kantokusha, meaning basically a designer in charge. And here we see the name, Yoshimoto Yoshio. Here is a Japanese naming order, i.e. the surname followed by a given name. And I have to say that I have just literally last week come across a new article on Yoshimoto, published in Japanese academic journal. So I could not find the time to incorporate new findings into this from Japanese article into my talk today, but I thought it would be important to mention this article at least. So the next line is Koji Sekkosha, meaning the construction company. And here we see the name Morota Gumi, meaning Morota Group. And then the certain name, Morota Shozaimon. So basically the Morota Gumi means the Morota Group, and then the Morota Shozaimon is a so-called manager or the head of this group in charge of this project. And please note that the Morota Group is not an ordinary carpenter for working exclusively residential buildings, but this group is what we call miyadaiku in Japanese, specializing in public buildings of historical significance such as shrines and temples. So this information confirms that the designing and the construction were locally done. So neither Tatars nor Euro-Americans were involved with actual building process of Tokyo Mosque. So once again, it is really interesting to know that Tokyo Mosque was constructed by miyadaiku, and who would not have any clue about Islamic architecture, thus likely to have followed the architecture plan provided by the Japanese designer, who would equally have no clue and probably almost no knowledge on Islamic architecture. So here the question arises, from where Yoshimoto got sources of inspiration for designing Tokyo Mosque. So as you can see from a photo on the left-hand side, probably taken in the 1970s, the mosque was a concrete structure, and its entrance facade and the part of the single minaret were ornate with painted carving. So it's not tiled, but painted. Amongst the most comparable architectural examples to Tokyo Mosque are, of course, the Tatar mosques in Astrakhan. This is just some of the examples. And judging by strong Tatar elements, it is reasonable to assume that major sources of inspiration for designing Tokyo Mosque must have come from Tatar visual sources, photographs and drawings, most probably provided by the Tatar communities in Tokyo, who would also have given some kind of ideas verbally explaining to about their homeland mosque style to Yoshimoto. Being an ordinary Japanese, Yoshimoto would not have any previous experience on designing mosques and even had probably almost no knowledge on mosque architecture, considering the fact that very few Japanese individuals were able to travel abroad and let alone extensive fieldwork across Eurasia at the time. Although the Tokyo Mosque survived during the Second World War, the original Tatar Tokyo Mosque had to be demolished in 1986 because of severe structural damage. So what we have now is this Neo-Ottoman mosque, unfortunately, which was designed by a Turkish architects, Muharrem Hirem Şenerp, and built in 2000, with a considerable amount of marble imported from Turkey, much resembling the so-called Blue Mosque in Beirut. The current Tokyo Mosque turns to be the far frontier Ottoman-style building one can find across the globe. So now have a look at the map called the Qibla Finder. That's just to double check the location of Tokyo Mosque in relation to Mecca. So when the mosque was built in the 1930s, the district called Shibuya was considered a suburb. And so the downtown Tokyo was unfortunately severely bombed. So almost all buildings, wooden buildings, were all gone. So this may be the reason that Tokyo Mosque survived during the war. And nowadays, Tokyo Mosque remains the kind of hidden spot for most locals and also tourists alike, but it is a most important hub of small but existing Japanese Muslim communities, as well as the Tatar diaspora, both from the first generation of Tatar migrants in Japan, as far as I know, some 500-600 Tatars still living in Japan, and also those from all over the world, the Tatar diasporas, especially those from California. So when I visited the Tokyo Mosque some weeks ago, I met the Tatars from California. So it's an interesting place. If you have a chance to visit Tokyo, I would highly recommend. It's a very welcoming place. And also the mosque has recently featured in Saudi Aramco magazine, for instance. And the mosque now has a halal supermarket and also kind of Damascus room. Not really, but one can have tea there. So once again, anyone is welcome to visit Tokyo Mosque. But please do not forget the original Tokyo Mosque, despite its current appearance. So now we are moving to a southern route. So the southern group of Muslims came from South Asia, who are mainly involved with commercial activities, especially textile trading. Although they are initially temporary business-oriented visitors rather than refugees or migrants, many South Asian Muslims, together with other South Asian non-Muslims, notably Parsis, Zoroastrians, as well as some Iranians and people from the Arab world, found Japan as an utopia-like modern Orient. South Asians were concentrated in the western part of the country called Kansai region, and particularly Kobe, where a foreign settlement was located during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as you can see here on the map. The historical background of South Asian Muslims in Kobe has been studied in details by the book called Terrains of Exchange, published in 2014. So I'm going to elaborate on the architectural aspect of Kobe Mosque today. Like Yokohama near Tokyo, Kobe became a cosmopolitan port city where a large number of Europeans and Americans, such predominantly Christians, were around the same time staying in a foreign settlement. While churches were being constructed for them, an idea of building a mosque were also got emerged among South Asians who used Kobe as a center of their business networks across the country. So unlike the Tatars, who emphasized the mosque as their religious community symbol, South Asian Muslims in Japan, most of them were Anglicized, considered a mosque as a hub of their secular business meeting venue. On the screen, we have a portrait of South Asian benefactors, although most of the financial contributions came from Tatars already living in Japan. Although construction works were done by a Japanese company called Takenaka Corporation, the architect whom South Asian committee members chose was, however, neither Japanese nor South Asian, but the Bohemian architect called Jan Joseph Schwark, one of the several Central Europeans who were wandering around Russia and East Asia after the collapse of the Habsburg Empire in 1918. Schwark was in fact not the most celebrated Central European architect in Japan, since the most famous and influential one was Jan Lethel, who designed the Hiroshima Prefecture Exhibition Hall, now known as Hiroshima Peace Memorial or Atomic Bomb Dome. What we know so far is that Schwark arrived in Japan in 1923 and mostly designing churches and schools in various locations across the country. He appears to act mainly as a structural engineer rather than as a designer, thus his buildings do not carry any distinctive characters. Initiated by South Asian Muslim experts, business experts, and designed by Central European architects, as well as thanks to the financial support from Tatar communities in Japan, Kobe Mosque was able to open in 1935, in fact, a few years earlier than Tokyo Mosque, and became the first purpose-built mosque in Japanese architecture history. The photo on the screen is a group of Tatars at the opening ceremony in front of the mosque. So leaving some Tatar flavors on the facade and minaret decoration, and Kobe Mosque is slightly different from a Tokyo Mosque. And here there are some problems with translation. Let's say just one example. So here we see, of course, a Masjid Kobe, but in Latin script, Kobe Muslim Mosque. But of course, doesn't make any sense. Why repeat? It can be called just Kobe Mosque, but why Kobe Muslim Mosque? And this is basically a direct translation from, as I say, Kaikyo Reihaido, Tokyo. So Kaikyo means Islamic Kai. Kai is actually Chinese Hui, so the refers to Muslims. And so the Kaikyo, the Muslim religion, and then Reihaido is the place of worship. So it's a lot of redundant, repetitive expressions in Japanese. Then when translated into the Latin, so it's also English. So it's also get very complicated. So I can go on talking about this struggles to find the best terms for like mosque and minaret and so on in Japanese. But anyway, so this is just one example that Kobe Muslim Mosque. So then I can show you some photos, the interior of the Kobe Mosque. So if you get into this building, the first impression you may have is quite narrow in space, but it's extremely tall in height. So kind of there's a strong sense of hierarchy here, in a way like being inside the cathedral. So this may be because that the Bohemian architect had again no previous knowledge on Islamic architecture, mosque architecture, so he may have had used his familiar knowledge about religious buildings, namely churches. But also, this is of course, another question is what is a definite source of inspiration for designing Kobe Mosque. And here we don't have any surviving record, for instance, like how the communication was done between the architects and also South Asians, also the Tatar communities in Japan. So one could only imagine that, as in the case of Tokyo Mosque, the sources of inspiration came probably from Tatar sources, photographs, drawings, once again, and also the verbally transmitted, like they suggested by Tatars, to build like this kind of architecture. But once again, I need to still work on this question of the source of inspiration for these unique mosque architectures in Japan. So, like Tokyo Mosque, Kobe Mosque survived from several disasters, ranging from Kobe flood in 1938, World War II, and the Great Kansai earthquake in 1995. And actually, I was not so far from Kobe in 1995. I still remember that we were worried about old temples and shrines in Kyoto and adjoining places like Kobe will be gone. But what is great actually in Japanese architectural tradition that the wooden buildings are quite sustainable actually with earthquakes. But back to this the Kobe Mosque during the war, as you can see here. So also thanks to a Bohemian architect who was clearly interested in sustainability rather than its design, Kobe Mosque did not suffer serious damage, and despite the war and also natural disasters, and as you can see, it also still stands as it was in the 1930s. So, for instance, on the photo during the war, the mosque and also behind there you see churches, namely concrete buildings, were not burned down, while the traditional Japanese houses, wooden buildings, were all gone. In retrospect, Schwark, the Bohemian architect, left Japan in April 1941 due to a deteriorating political situation in Asia-Pacific region, heading to Latin America, where he continued to participate in several projects, mostly designing churches. And for him, Kobe Mosque is a kind of unintended legacy of his professional life in the land of the rising sun. So here I also wanted to show you the location of Kobe Mosque by using a Qibla finder, again in relation to Mecca. So it's not so far from the port, and on below you see the photo of the current Kobe. So if you remember the Kobe during the war, it's all gone. So now these are all the new buildings built up. So in fact, it is not easy to find the Kobe Mosque. So you really have to be careful which street we have to go, and so kind of hidden building. But this mosque is quite important because, after all, this is the first mosque built in Japan. And there's yet another third mosque in Japan, in fact, which was built in Nagoya in central Japan. And it was initiated once again by the Tatars, who used the house of their community member as a mosque, started in 1931 and officially in 1937. The mosque was, as you can see here, this is really like the ordinary house, wooden house. And the first floor served as a prayer room and the second floor as a madrasa. And this charming little wooden mosque was burned down during the war. So I exclude the Nagoya Mosque from my main discussion today, but I thought it would be important to mention this vanished mosque in Japan. In general, it is a challenging task to explore the history of building environment in early 20th century Japan, and particularly Tokyo, since a number of buildings and documents were unfortunately lost due to a 1923 earthquake and heavy bomb attacks during the Pacific War, and many valuable archival materials sunk into obscurity. For example, little is known about Muslim cemeteries in Japan, due to a lack of data regarding individual burials. To conclude, this talk hopes to propose an alternative avenue to think the meaning of both Islamic and Japanese architectures. Are they compatible? It's a big question. Japan is a traditional, not conservative, but also kind of pragmatic at the same time, which means that it can embrace the old in the new in a holistic way. And in this aspect, Tokyo Mosque and Kobe Mosque are a case in point. With no previous mosque on the site, Japan made a unique effort to integrate hitherto unconventional buildings into the urban landscape of two of the cosmopolitan cities in the country in the 1930s. So I want to conclude my talk by showing these wonderful photos. The very proud Tatar ladies are standing in front of a Tokyo Mosque. Though we don't have this Tokyo Mosque anymore, but this is also quite a nice reminder of the kind of lost, but still kind of surviving Tatar heritage in Japan. So, thank you for your attention, and I'm sure this is a kind of unusual approach to the history of Islamic architecture, and I'm very excited to know about your responses and opinions on this topic, because I found this topic is very is fascinating for me, coming from the Tokyo. So for me, this is also kind of discovery that I must confess that I did not know so much about this Tokyo Mosque, but also funny thing is actually I studied Arabic at Kobe Mosque, so I knew Kobe Mosque when I was studying in Kyoto, but the Tokyo Mosque I didn't know until quite recently, I have to admit. So there are still so many things to discover. Even in East Asia, that we have so many things to do in terms of the study of Islamic architecture, also Islamic art in general. So thank you very much, and once again for giving me this opportunity to introduce this unusual topic to you.
I need you to be all awake.
Oh. This? Oh, yes.
We need a second mic, because how is she going to answer the question?
You have to do it.
I speak into hello over people online. Okay, thank you. This was such a fascinating lecture. It's amazing to learn about these mosques in Japan, and
I have two questions. The first is the early mosques, did they function? I mean, we know that they were built for the communities themselves, but in this period also, especially as people are moving and they have to establish themselves in a new community, mosques in that period elsewhere in the world start to develop other functions like cultural mediation, cultural centers to enable dialogue with the host community. Is that the case in Japan, or do they primarily serve the Tatar, let's say, community and the Southeast Asian community for their religious ceremonies? And the second question is the new mosques, the Neo-Ottoman thing that was built. It's very interesting because that ties also into kind of trends elsewhere in the world. I mean, these earlier mosques seem to signal the identity of their communities, but then the new thing is more maybe about some kind of economic or new identity spreading influence, cultural influence. How do you see the symbolism of this Neo-Ottoman mosque being built without any relation to what was there before? Is that part of this larger trend of Turkish investments and development of the Neo-Ottoman style?
I'm assuming there are people who are listening online, but we have no idea.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your two questions. First question about this how the first Tatar mosque in Tokyo was used. I believe exclusively among Tatar communities and also South Asian Muslims, and also they say Muslim expats, let's say. Also, what I know that Tokyo Mosque, also Kobe Mosque, became a kind of sightseeing spots for diplomats from Middle Eastern countries. And I know there are many interesting albums made by embassies. And so the diplomats are very proud standing in the Tokyo Mosque and Kobe Mosque. And so there are some interesting evidence that it was used not just the communities, but this kind of diplomats. But I don't think it's anything related to ordinary Japanese people who, like me, I did not know this mosque until quite recently. So. So that's my answer. The second question is about this neo-Ottomanization, this trend in this sponsoring these new buildings, mosque buildings across the globe right now by the Turkish government. The fact is actually the site of Tokyo Mosque is owned by technically the Turkey. So the next to Tokyo Mosque, there's a Turkish Cultural Center sponsored by Turkey, and so there's a strong funding, strong emphasis, and also funding coming from Turkey. This is true. So one could say that yes, instead of the building Tatar-style mosque, yes, we now have new Ottoman building. So this was at that moment I don't know what kind of conversation had between Japanese government and Turkish government at that time, but I would assume that this new Ottoman style could have been recommended, I think, so that they say symbolize the Japanese-Turkish cultural relation, something like this. So yeah, that is another interesting topic one could investigate. So yeah, that's all I can say. So indeed, yes, is a very strong Turkish involvement with the Tokyo Mosque. But the Kobe Mosque is, I don't see any government, any of the countries involved with the Kobe Mosque. So Kobe Mosque is quite empty, actually. As I said, it's also very difficult to find it. It's tall, all kinds of office buildings and so on. But the Tokyo Mosque is now becoming kind of a place for even for tourists. They discover, the Tokyo Mosque. But also next to the Turkish Culture Center. So now also quite a lot of activities going on. There may be more even conferences, academic conferences, and so on. Even there's a little library and kind of archive and so on. So yeah, so these the two mosques now having a totally different the functions, I would say. It's a pity because after all, Kobe Mosque is the oldest mosque in Japan. So, but kind of forgotten actually.
Thank you. I was wondering, I noticed that in the photos that we have of the original Tokyo Camii, there seems to be a lot of stucco work, and I was wondering if you had any sort of information about who might have made this stuff, perhaps Tatar artisans or something of the sort, because it seems like it doesn't look like the manual skills that go into other Japanese buildings of this time period. It seems like a different, like, hard skill to make this kind of form, and I was just wondering if you had any information about that.
Yeah, I wish I could know more about this. The point is actually we know there's a construction company. It's a so-called Miyadaiku, specializing temples and Buddhist temples and shrines. So Shinto shrines. So apparently this particular group I mentioned, Morota group, is still doing a business apparently. Recently, I got this information. So this time I could not find any chance to contact this Morota group, but I'm hoping that they might have something. So it will be very good that we know exactly what happened, what kind of procedures, and so. But also we don't have so many photographs. And I'm trying to gather whatever I can find right now, but also from these old photos, it's very difficult to say. So that's the next step that I try to find, someone who even got involved with somehow remember what happened in this 1930s. But right now I can only have these photos and I can say something, but it's true, we need to know more about it.
Thanks for this. It was fascinating. It's a very foreign topic to me. My question is very simple. I was wondering if these are the only two mosques in Japan right now, and if so, what happened after World War II for the interest in building mosques to kind of cease, and if they did build more mosques, if you know anything about them, and if that tradition of building and the borrowed architectural styles and histories has evolved in some sort of way. So, yeah.
After the war, of course, the whole emphasis was to rebuild the country. So there's no room for thinking about mosques. So ordinary housings had to be built and office buildings and so on. So I would say that there's absolutely no even ideas about mosques in the later part of, the second part of the 20th century, I would say. So the reviving interest in mosque architecture probably from 2000, around 2000. That in fact we have some interesting architectures, not just temples and shrines, but there are some interesting buildings. But the another fundamental issue is actually there's not a big Muslim community in Japan, so there's no need to have so many mosques. And but the last few years things got a bit changed because the Japan's tourism market was open. So now we have so many visitors coming from Malaysia and Indonesia and India, all over the world. So not really Japanese people, but these visitors from the Muslim countries, they want to visit mosques. So they want mosques, but not really Japanese people. But this is actually a good thing that step by step, the Japanese culture, which is famous being homogeneous, but it's become a bit more like international, and it's a bit more global. Let's say step by step. So Tokyo, for instance, there's some now the new mosques in each district, but not all, but step by step, one by one is but not like the Tokyo Jami, which is a very grand scale one. But right now this is some kind of a combination with community center. This kind of mosque is growing, but not this kind of the majestic building. So we only have two majestic ones. So that's the situation. Let's see. Maybe in 10 years, probably situation may change, but that's the situation right now.
Thank you so much. You talked about the problem of translation, both the kind of linguistic translation of some of these terms into Japanese and then back into English, or these different directions. But I wonder about the kind of formal translation of some of these elements within the actual architecture and the building itself, especially since in the case of the Tokyo Mosque, the construction company had worked on, Shinto shrines and other types of structures. So have you seen either in photographs or plans, or do you know of actual influences from those types of structures coming into the construction of the mosque form?
Yeah, this is an excellent question. And actually, yes, it's a
Thank you so much for your talk. I have a bit of a historiographic question, especially concerning that 3-page article on this mosque. I found it absolutely fascinating, and this might also be in part due to my own ignorance about the Japanese historiography on Islamic architecture, but the fact that it didn't have an author, is that normal for the period, or is that also something that might tell us about the status of Islamic art in these architectural magazines or Islamic architecture, and also does it spur further interest in other buildings? For instance, does it spark interest in the Kobe Mosque or, other Islamic architecture elsewhere? I guess how long does it take to really kind of propel into its own after this article?
You need the sound.
It's a good question. Thank you very much. And this kind of article was a kind of a standard type of articles can be found in this kind of magazines. So there's no really authors. It's not really, we call it academic journal, but during this time, no really. So this is also the case with sometimes museum journals too. Many essays, there's no authors. Sometimes editor would have written the whole essay, but sometimes we cannot find like we have now in the a designated this specific author's name. But so this article might have been edited and also written by the editor-in-chief. That's the one possibility, but I don't have any evidence that. During this time, Islamic architecture was virtually unknown in Japan. So really the question is who really wrote this? And as I said, that the first 2 pages are really just very general introduction of Islamic architecture. So what is needed in mosque, like this kind of very, very basic explanations about main functions. And so this kind of explanation could have been done by anyone, but not really academic. But the last page, this third page, is really giving us basic data about constructions and the size of the building. So also the architect name, but that's it. And even I don't know who did this beautiful drawing. So I have to find out. The one thing I could do is, for instance, I should ask the Kenchiku Zashi, this is the journal office. They should have archives, in fact. So if I get this kind of archival documentation about, like, correspondence with authors and editors of this time, maybe I may know more about it. But right now, I don't know really who really wrote this article. But it's interesting, it is a first of this kind in Japanese. This could be a separate academic article. I could even consider writing it, but it's very interesting, in fact. As I also talked in my talk, mentioned in my talk, that this linguistic challenges are also quite interesting. So, and also these old photos, where are they now? I don't know. Big question. It's a pity. I wish I could have. So this is, it's very fascinating, but unfortunately, we are really still looking for these photographs of the first Tatar Tokyo Mosque. Could be nice to reconstruct the whole this decoration and everything. Particularly, this interior images are quite valuable, because exterior images, even we can find it from newspapers of this time. But interior, I was fascinated. It's rare, actually. And as I say, also like albums. So I'm now contacting all these people who might have kind of albums, So still so many things to do, actually. But it's a very interesting topic.
Okay, my series of questions, not just one. So I have multiple questions, but I'm not going to ask them all. But I'll start one by one. I mean, the first is that I'm very surprised, and this is perhaps something that is not part of your research, But I'm very surprised that Japan escaped an Islamic presence in the early medieval period. It's like, how come? Because, I mean, this is when sort of like Chinese cities were teeming with Muslim traders that ultimately will become the Hui community in China with millions of Muslims today. So I don't know if you want to answer that, but I want you to go back to the same image that we were in when I asked my next question. No, I mean where we were. To go back to the article, if we can. Yes. Yeah. So my second question is to put what we are looking at in context. So I'm assuming there are no native Muslims. When I was in Japan in 1998, I met two Japanese Muslims who actually said that Muslims are discriminated against in Japan and are not allowed to build mosques. I don't know if you know that, but there is a small Islamic community of native Japanese converts, most of them, of course. I want to go back to the Tatar and who the Tatar are in the 1930s, and just remind everyone that in 1905, Japan defeated Russia in a war that was the first time in which the East beat the West. And all Eastern countries rejoiced at that, to the point where Muslim poets in Arabic and in Turkish were writing actually poem in support of Japan and calling it sort of like the new rising country of the East and the one that would lead the East to some sort of a development. And of course, actually, the Tatar are an extremely discriminated against minority in Russia. So their choice to come into Japan might be related to the notion that they see in Japan the possibility of a rising East, and that this is why they're coming, they're building their mosque there. Which takes me to this image that you have in here. That image of the mosque from the outside reminds me a lot of the mosque of Sultan Hassan in Cairo. And there are a lot of references in the architecture. The mihrab, for example, is a copy of the mihrab of Sultan Barquq or of Sultan Muayyad Sheikh in Cairo. So there are a lot of Mamluk references in here. It's not very clear where do they come from. I suspect from pictures. I suspect whoever designed it was looking at some sort of a photo book of Islamic architecture. Cairo is, of course, actually the most famous city, so most probably that's what you will have. But my question is still is, I mean, in the two mosques, in Kobe and in Tokyo, the minarets are Mamluk, of all types of minarets. Why? Given the fact that you have Iranian minarets and Indian minarets on the way, and if one is going to get them sort of like you get them from somewhere closer, and of course pagodas as minarets in China, that would have been also another possibility. And the last remark, it's not a question as much as a remark, is this building of a neo-Ottoman mosque in Kobe in Tokyo in the early 21st century. Could it be a reflection of that pan-Turkic project that Turkey was trying to do across Asia, including the Tatars, even though the Tatars remained as part of the Federation of Russia? But all these Islamic republic, Turkey was actually trying in the late 1990s and early 2000, not as a pan-Islamic as much as a pan-Turkic, and therefore the Ottoman style is something that doesn't reflect some sort of an Islamic direction as much as an attempt at perhaps wrapping these Tatar Muslims of Japan into that image of a great Turkey. Somewhat in the same question that Azra was asking, because the project was mostly economic and, of course, actually nationalistic. And I would assume that it will remain as such today.
Well, lot of questions. So the first question about why Japan did not have a deep contact with Islamic world, but also no really strong Islamization. Why Islamization didn't happen prior to the 19th century? This is the whole point that I spent 7 or 8 slides to explain that in the beginning of my talk, that Japan is really isolated, geographically speaking. So, okay, up to China, okay, I have to show you. In fact, we think that, Japan is not so far from China, but in fact, it's not, for instance, here. So this is very important to understand that this is a Malacca, so up to here, yes, this is very active. And this Indonesia, this is all makes sense. All this Indian Ocean trade network, so up to here is all this Islamization took place. But the question is going into this direction. And then all these Muslim traders, of course, needed a proper port, so they, going all this way. Then, of course, they could go far, but for some reasons, and the main port was always this, like now, of course, Hong Kong. So all concentrated at this point. Then that is all this Middle Eastern goods arrived there, and then the Muslim traders did not go far east. They all stayed here and then returned. So for this reason, for instance, even we have so-called like Samara finds in Japan. This interesting article, but all these finds, Iraqi shards and ceramic shards, came from China. So they arrived first China, then a so-called leftover somehow moved to Japan. So that's the kind of historical background that it's true Muslim traders went up to here, but they didn't go. So also we don't have a historical the record that the Muslim traders, settled in Japan, even China. They didn't settle. They stayed, but they didn't settle down. So that's the main reason that Islamization didn't happen. And also another reason I also explained that when this European colonizations starting here, Japan somehow avoided because this self-isolation policies. So close the door, don't come. So no contact. So this happened in the right time that the European powers all conquering this region. So that's also another thing that Japan had no contact with the rest of the world for nearly 250 years. So that's the it's a serious reason that Japan somehow missed the opportunity to receive more the cultural contacts. Anyway, so the next question is about this like 1990s. Before 2000, what was the situation of this like a mosque and also Muslim communities in Japanese Muslim communities in Tokyo, elsewhere in the country, and it's almost invisible communities, I would say, at that time. Now, still now. So at that time, like almost we didn't know even, like me, I'm from Tokyo, but I didn't know Tokyo Mosque. So they are quite invisible communities, and now thanks to this the tourist boom and so on. So now Japanese people are more interested in other cultures, particularly Muslim culture. So now it's totally different. But 1990s, 80s, there's no really talk about Islam and nothing. The third question is of course Tatars. They wanted to maybe they had already idea about Japan, like rising east and kind of utopia land, very modern, and so for this reason, yes, Tatar wanted to maybe come to Japan, and also at that time there's also these pan-Turkic ideas, the Turanism we call it, that the people from basically Hungary up to Japan were from the same origin, and this kind of, now we don't talk about it, but at that time there's a very fashionable ideology that all this Eurasia, people share the same common roots, including Japan. So Tatar, for Tatar at that time had a lot of options to go. Even like in Hungary, or up to like Finland, or even Japan. So yeah, that is true. And the third is these are Mamluk elements. I have to say yes. I'm very happy that I presented my talk in front of Nassau, because I have to say I just totally, yes, it's absolutely right. Now I have to rewrite my article because it's absolutely true. So these are really important. Yeah, thank you very much for pointing out this. It's true. Japanese architects may have gotten these ideas about, maybe Mamluk architecture through books. Probably, yes. There's a reasonable suggestion for this. Right. Then the question of the new Ottoman the mosque in Tokyo. Yeah, this is another topic actually. But this is I have to again need to know more about really what happened this new project of the building a new Tokyo mosque. This is maybe another topic. There should be an archive, but this is I had no time to get into this further this topic, but certainly interesting topic. Okay. So, thank you very much. Any more? Thank you.
Save this next article for my picture, since you're doing
Yes. Focusing on me,
Thank you.